Hello, hello, hello. Hey, this is Warren Redlick. Thank you so much for watching. Hello, hello, hello. This is Warren Redlick. Thank you so much for watching. I don't know what's happening. Can you guys hear me? What? Okay. YouTube is just freaking me out and making it get weirder and weirder and weirder. So I don't know what's going on with that. But I want to start with two major topics for today's live stream. The second topic, the bigger topic, I think, is robotaxi models for the future and specifically how robotaxi will spread. And I'm talking about Tesla robotaxi. Yeah, there's something glitch with YouTube. Don't worry about it. So how I think people don't have a sense of, and I think it's tough to figure out, and I'm not saying I'm correct, but I think I have a sense of if I was running Tesla, here's how I think I would roll robotaxi out to spread not just in one location, not just in the United States, but around the world, but starting in the United States and going out. I think, and China is another big factor. Before we dive into that, I want to talk about the supercharger team. This is something people are still angry about, people are still unhappy about. Elon axing it's really the charging infrastructure team, but people are calling it the supercharger team. And I want to give an example. I posted this on X and I want people to understand why I think there was a deep, deep problem in the supercharger, charging infrastructure team. I have a variety of thoughts about this, but there's a supercharger that was permits were filed not that long ago for a 200 unit supercharger station in Yeehaw Junction, Florida. And I think if you think about what's the CapEx, CapEx is capital expenditure. How much money would Tesla be investing in this location? What's the return on investment for this investment? And then you've got 200 superchargers. How many would be utilized at peak times? So when I say this, okay, Yeehaw Junction, this is the location. You can see the red arrow points to the location in Yeehaw Junction, Florida. Now you can see along the east coast of Florida, you've got many superchargers along the way. You're down here in Port St. Lucie, and this might be near Jupiter. Port St. Lucie's up here. Fort Pierce is up here. The Florida Turnpike at Fort Pierce makes a northwest turn or west northwest turn to go to Orlando, which is this corner up here. This is Orlando. You can see, I think you can see Kissimmee here. Kissimmee is part of Orlando. So if you're going north on I-95, there's a lot of superchargers on the way up. If you're going, once you hit Orlando, there's plenty of superchargers. On the west coast of Florida, which is not on this map, there's plenty of superchargers. And so when you're going on the Florida Turnpike to Orlando, which is a common trip for people from South Florida, right? If you want to go to Disney World, if you want to go to Universal Studios, there's a lot of stuff to do in Orlando. A lot of people from West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Miami-Dade County, the various populations in Palm Beach County, Broward County, and Miami-Dade County. People like going to Disney World. People like going to Universal Studios. It is a popular trip. And I've made that trip many times. So it almost makes sense to have a supercharger in Yeehaw Junction, but as you can see, there already is a supercharger called the Yeehaw Junction supercharger on the Florida Turnpike. Now, that's not a particularly big one. I think there's 8 chargers there. And then north of that, well, I've charged at once, Canoe Creek. Canoe Creek on the way to Orlando, there's another supercharger. I think it's 8 stalls in Canoe Creek. That's the only one other than a one time I've had 2 supercharger waits in my entire 60,000 miles of driving with Tesla. One was when it was Cyber Rodeo and there's a whole bunch of people driving to the southern tip of Texas. And one of the superchargers was not, actually 2 of the stalls in a small supercharger space were not working. And that created a backup. And it was like a 150 kilowatt charger, not a 250. So it was, it was very slow there. It was a problem. So the other time I waited was at Canoe Creek. I waited 5 minutes because there were 8 stalls and there were 8 cars there, and I only waited 5 minutes to get a spot. So I could see adding 8 chargers to the Yeehaw Junction Turnpike charger. I could see adding 8 chargers to the Canoe Creek supercharger station. That could make sense. I could get that. But 200 stalls at Yeehaw Junction. Now, to be clear, this location is not on the turnpike. It is off the turnpike. You have to get off the exit. It's very close to the exit, to be fair. It's very close. I don't even know if it's 100 meters, 100 yards. It's close. There's a racetrack gas station that was just built, and I believe it's a area of land right next to the racetrack. It may be part of a deal with the racetrack. gas station to deploy all these superchargers. Because having the racetrack there means you got somewhere to go while your car's charging. They, hot dogs and coffee and, convenience store type stuff. And there's a pilot gas station across the street. And there's a fruit stand. Like I know this place really well. On the very left edge of the map on that road is Florida State Route 60, is Lake Wales, Florida, and my kids went to camp in Lake Wales, Florida, and I drove up to Yeehaw Junction and got off the highway and went there, and I've been through there a whole bunch of times. And this is Vero Beach on this side here. So I'm just going to say that, and it's Florida State Route 60 is a 1 lane each way highway at that location, roughly 1 lane each way. Maybe there's widens to 2 lanes briefly, but it's basically a 1 lane each way highway with a 60 mile an hour speed limit. The volume of traffic on Florida Route 60 is not going to support 200 people using a supercharger. Not. The volume of traffic coming up the Florida Turnpike, and I'm going to show you there's a conversation I've had with James Stevenson now. And here's the problem. Like, Tesla is is right now very focused on CapEx and has always been focused on CapEx efficiency. We don't want to spend capital in ways that are frivolous unless we're going to get payback. And generally speaking, if you're running a business, you invest capital, you expect a return on your investment. And if you're going to invest, I think this is something like $100 million. I forget the exact number, but it's a crazy amount of money that you've got to invest to deploy 200 superchargers. Like, when's this going to pay back? And I think you could see, like, I've been to superchargers, like there'll be a Buc-ee's somewhere. Maybe it's the one between Birmingham, Alabama and Atlanta, Georgia. And there's like 16 or 24 superchargers in a row. You go at night, you're the only one, right? It may be busy during the day, but if you go at night, you're the only one. And, one of the challenges with deploying superchargers is there's a lot of people charging during the day and there aren't a lot of people charging at night. Now, you're never going to fill 200 people in this supercharger. The unlikely event that James Stevenson is taking when people need to escape a hurricane, they need a lot of superchargers. I'm like, we'll dive into that. But just from the fundamental point here, like, how much is it going to cost to deploy these superchargers and how long is it going to take for them to pay back that cost? And with this particular supercharger, my answer is really simple. Never. Never. You will never get enough utilization of this particular supercharger station to pay it back. It's not going to pay itself back in 2 years. It's not going to pay itself back in 3 years. It's not going to pay itself back in 10 years. The vast majority of the time, this supercharger station will have 5 or 10 people charging at peak for a day. Maybe 20. You're never going to get near 200. I don't even think in a hurricane you're going to get near 200. I'll explain why. So James responds, as a former South Florida resident, technically I am still a South Florida resident. I'm a resident of Delray Beach, Florida. I own 2 cars in Florida. I pay car insurance in Florida. I vote in Florida. I'm traveling a lot, but I am a resident officially of Delray Beach, Florida. I thought you would understand the justification better than most. And James was touting this. So it was in April. Next time you have to evacuate from a hurricane, an unprecedented 200 superchargers. So here's the problem. What James is saying is they will use all 200 superchargers once every 5 years or so when a large number of people flee a Cat 5 hurricane that looks like it's going to strike South Florida. I did live in South Florida for 11 years, and I'm back and forth. And it'll be used by all the South Florida Teslas that have less than 200 miles of range. Why do I say that? It is 164 miles driving from Miami to Yeehaw Junction, Florida. Now, I lived in Boca Raton, 120 miles. If you're charged to 80%, you're not stopping at 120 miles. Now, something a lot of you might not know. If you are a resident of Florida, let's say, and there's a hurricane on its way, your car warns you and says charge to full. Like, you don't normally charge to full on a nickel-based battery pack. I think on the LFP packs you would normally charge to full, but on a nickel-based battery pack you'd normally charge to 80%. And Tesla actually warns you. I think you get an alert on your phone. Hey, charge your car to 100%. There's a hurricane coming. So the overwhelming majority of Teslas in South Florida, if there's a hurricane coming, will be charged to 100%. And the overwhelming majority of Teslas have, well, almost all Teslas have over 250 miles of range, and many have over 300 miles of range. So what are the odds you're going to stop at 150 miles, right? And, then you have this question, going back and forth with James on this. you'll notice that there's this road called I-75 that goes west from Miami-Dade. It actually goes west from Fort Lauderdale. And that goes up the west coast of Florida. And then I showed you on the other map that I-95 goes up the east coast of Florida. So at best, 1/3 of the traffic is going to go up the turnpike to Orlando. Now, if you were trying to get out of Florida, you wouldn't go to Orlando because traffic is absolute hell in Orlando. That's the worst way to go. You would go up I-95 or you would go up I-75. You would not want to drive across Orlando when people are fleeing a hurricane. That's not the route I would take. That's just nuts. I wouldn't go that way. That's the wrong way to go. So, but that's once every 5 years. And we had some more back and forth, and he's like, well, imagine the public relations disaster if a whole bunch of Teslas can't charge on their way fleeing a hurricane. Like, okay, well, then you're going to have that problem on the East Coast. You're going to have that problem on the West Coast because you don't have 200 superchargers. There's a bunch of superchargers. There ain't 200. There's more volume going up I-95, and there's more volume going up I-75. I'm not going up. The turnpike only has 2 lanes. So, I-75 and I-95 have more lanes. It just didn't make sense. Massive waste. So not sure why you're still gnawing. Well, the point is that when Elon is looking at the supercharger team, the charging infrastructure team, and he's making a decision, who's excellent, who's trustworthy, who's necessary. Whoever made the decision to build a 200-unit supercharger station in Yeehaw Junction, Florida, was not using excellent decision making, might not be trustworthy, and might not be necessary. Like, if that's the quality of decision making you have on the charging team, then this might not be necessary. The stock source says I've been to the current largest station, 88 stalls in Quartzsite, Arizona. When I was there were 6 people charging. Well, a one-shot experience doesn't tell you anything, right? There are times when superchargers get busy, right? But I've driven 60,000 miles in Teslas. I've been to a lot of superchargers. I've done a whole bunch of road trips. It's really unusual to have a supercharger full, right? And to fill, can you start discussing something important like Optimus? I'm going to talk about Robotaxis next. Optimus, I don't think I'm going to talk about Optimus because I think we're too early on that. There's a video that just came out today, very recently on Optimus, where they showed Optimus doing some stuff. And I don't feel like I have insight. And there's other people who are doing videos about that who have more insight than I do on Optimus. And Elon said it's going to have 22 degrees of freedom in the hand. Like, okay, really cool. So I just wanted to hit on this point because there are people who are still angry about the supercharger team getting cut, and this is a massive inefficiency, and I don't think I covered this point on my channel. So TB hits on the next point that I'm going to talk about, and I think this is important. TB says, I heard you on your space trying to convince people that Tesla is going to spin off the charging business. No one was buying it. I didn't say Tesla is going to spin off the charging business. I said Tesla should consider spinning off the charging business. I think if you were Tesla is not run by finance MBAs. Right? There's these MBAs who are trained in finance and they're trained in this other stuff. And they have this, like, how do you allocate capital and how do you do things to maximize share price or maximize shareholder value? And I think if you took that perspective and you said, gee, Goldman Sachs a couple of years ago said that the supercharger network could grow to $25 billion a year in annual revenue. Well, if you spun the supercharger business off, what would the market cap be? I think if you did, I'm just throwing out a suggestion here. And the reason for this suggestion is because Tesla's concerned about having sufficient capital to fund its operations, to fund AI investment. And it's concerned about diverting CapEx into deploying superchargers when they're trying to put CapEx into AI. So if Tesla spun off, and I'm not saying they will. I'm saying I don't think this is a crazy idea. If Tesla said, we're going to do an IPO of the supercharger network as its own business, it's basically like a gas station, company, right? And we're going to sell 40% of the company. We're going to retain 60% so we control the company, but we're going to sell 40%. And what would the valuation be? And I think this is probably a $10 billion company. The supercharger network company now gets $4 billion in cash. that it can use to deploy, to invest a lot. Like Tesla is in a way capital constrained right now and can't invest as much as they might like to in building superchargers. If you did this and you freed up $4 billion in capital, on the one hand, now the supercharger team has a lot of money to invest in deploying superchargers. And maybe related businesses, like maybe they say, hey, why don't we monetize this? Why don't we put, diners and convenience stores that are, when we're building out superchargers, let's maximize the revenue and profit potential here, and let's get Starlink antennas and deploy Wi-Fi and maybe even put up 5G antennas. And there's a lot of things that use the Starlink connection in a remote location and then deploy a 5G antenna and like add cell service, and who knows what opportunities a company that's purely focused on superchargers would be able to unlock if they did that. But the critical point here is they would probably raise at least a few $1 billion in capital that they could invest in superchargers without having to worry about Papa Elon saying, I don't think that's a good investment. Right? They would want to, you would still want somebody in charge who's going to be focused on being CapEx efficient, but you'd have less constraints. And Tesla would no longer have to invest in the supercharger network, and it would free up Tesla's capital to invest in AI. Because right now they're investing, hundreds of millions of dollars in building superchargers every year. And that's hundreds of millions of dollars that could go into H100s. So, let's see. TB says, you convinced me it's not as bad an idea as initially thought. I just thought speculation on why people were let go is distasteful. What do I know? Yeah, no, I think there is still a lot of speculation about why people were let go. Am I back in Thailand? Yes, I'm in Thailand. I was in Cambodia for a few days to get my visa. I now have a 90-day retirement, the start of a 90-day retirement visa for Thailand. And in about a month, I should get a 1-year extension to stay in Thailand for an additional year on top of the 90 days. So it works out to a year and 90 days. I have to jump through some hoops. I had a condo that I was supposed to move into 2 days ago, and that fell through because the condo owner apparently doesn't want to file proper tax paperwork with this country. But I have an appointment in 2 days to look at another condo in the same building that looks even better. And by the way, that one was supposed to be $540 a month. The next one's gonna be like $600 a month. High floor, like, more than 30 stories up for this new one. Spectacular river views, 2-story gym in the building, rooftop sky lounge, whatever, indoor and outdoor sky lounge, and 8th floor infinity swimming pool. Pretty cool. So that's life. Life advice: marriage first or kids first? Why? I think that's that's. I don't think I can give that life advice for anyone. I know in my personal case today, it's kids first. But when I was younger, it was marriage first. I think that really depends on the individual and what you're trying to do. So, yeah, before we dive into Robotaxi models, I do want to talk briefly about what's coming. I forgot to add this to the description, but we know that Tesla said in the Q1 slide deck that they're bringing forward a bunch of models. And not one model. They're bringing forward models that they're going to produce on existing lines because they have excess capacity. So my theory only, smaller Model Y, larger Model Y. They have nailed manufacturing a Model Y. They've just crushed manufacturing a Model Y. They've got super efficient manufacturing a Model Y. Sedans are not in high demand. SUVs are in high demand. So a smaller model, I view the Model Y as a Toyota Highlander competitor. And I think a smaller Model Y with, no question of no third row, right? A smaller Model Y, an inch or two narrower, 3 or 4 inches shorter, drop a couple 100 pounds, maybe drop the height just a tiny bit to reduce frontal surface area, get a little bit more efficiency. I think you could probably pop out a Model Y that now becomes competitive with the Toyota RAV4, which is a very high volume vehicle, right? So I think you get a lot of volume if you, now you're undercutting your Model Y, but you're expanding the TAM, the total addressable market, because you're able to bring the price down another $3,000-$4,000. It's not the $20,000 vehicle, it's not the $25,000 vehicle, but maybe you're getting close to that $30,000 price point. You do a rear-wheel drive long-range version of this vehicle, and you probably don't get to 30, but maybe you get to 32. And I think that could be a big game changer. The bigger one that I'm excited about, because I'm a fat slob, I'm not really fat. I said this to somebody, he's like, Warren, you're not fat. All right, whatever. Is what if you did a larger Model Y? What if you ditched the Model X? Model X and Model S together are maybe 50,000 units a year. What if you did a Model Y XL or a new Model X or Model XY, make it a chromosome thing. I don't know. Um, 2 inches wider, 6 to 8 inches longer, a genuine third row, charge under like $59,000. I think you sell 250,000 of those in the United States and 250,000 overseas. I think that thing sells like gangbusters. It won't sell in, if it's wider, it's not going to sell in Japan. And maybe you don't want to make it wider. I think you could probably get away without making it wider. But you have the width of the vehicle makes it hard to sell. The size of the vehicle makes it hard to sell in a country like Japan. China would eat it up. I think Europe would eat it up. And parts of Europe would eat it up. Parts of the world would eat it up. So I think that would be big. Yeah, I think a van, I mean, there's definitely talk of a Tesla van. Is the Tesla van built on the Cybertruck platform? I don't think so. The Cybertruck platform is a high cost platform, and I don't think that the van needs the same structural integrity that the Cybertruck's exposed to much rougher conditions than the van will be. I think a van on if you could somehow build the Model Y platform big enough to sustain a van, a cargo van, but you could do it on the Cybertruck platform, and maybe they have cost savings they can find doing it on the Cybertruck platform. And those vans, those FedEx and UPS vans are pretty expensive. $50,000, $80,000. I don't think is unusual. Even $100,000 maybe in some cases. So Tom Cornette, the entire charging infrastructure team was filed something like 500 people, which you'd need the S and X because house would you spell sexy. I think we can grow out of that. I don't think there would be a minivan version. You need to be marriage first in order to create the kids. You can switch to kids first later. I don't know about that. So Model 3, so Model 3 coupes, I think the thing is that the market for sedans and coupes is small. The market for SUVs is just larger. Consumer demand right now, that's where it is. I do think we're heading, and then of course we're heading towards Cybercab, the Robotaxi vehicle, which is probably still on track for manufacturing in late 2025, but maybe they're delaying the CapEx on that, and it won't be until 2026. A van down by the river. I don't know if the Model Y platform could sustain the type of van that they really want. I also think the next generation platform, you could build a small like Ford Transit van. That could make sense. But the full size vans, I'm not sure you can squeeze that onto a Model Y platform, but I wouldn't underestimate Tesla. So that's something that I think is coming that I think people should be excited about. That I think by the end of this year, we're going to see 2 or 3 new models. And they said new models, some more affordable. Not one more affordable, some more affordable. So you don't realize how small the Y is until you actually drive the X a lot. Point being, I'm not sure how much smaller they can make the Y. Well, get in a RAV4. Get in a RAV4, you'll get your answer. I think the Model Y has plenty of room. I don't know why you're saying that. My Model 3 is pretty big inside. I sat in the back seat of a Model 3 on a road trip across the country with one other person in the back seat, 4 people in the car, and the Model 3 had tons of room. So Model Y is bigger than Model 3. You could scrunch it down a little bit, you could get there. So I think that you can, if the goal is to get to 3 million units, and right now we got 1.8 million units, and maybe we could squeeze 2 million of the existing models, I could see getting easily 250,000 out of a newer model, a larger Model Y, easily 500,000 out of a smaller Model Y, and then like a transit van type, van. And if you're not familiar, the Ford Transit van is a smaller van. It's much smaller than the full-size vans we see doing a lot of commercial work. So that could be something. And if they did a larger van, that's, game-changing. I think the larger van's going to have its own manufacturing line, so I don't think that's going to fit with this. So we'll see what they do. But this should be coming soon, and that's going to be a positive for people who are concerned about the short term. The long term, it's obviously about AI, and what we're seeing with Optimus, this new video with Optimus, which I'm not going to dive into today, and what's going on with AI with Robotaxi. That's big stuff. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, though, is I want to talk about the big topic. Big topic I want to talk about is thinking about how Robotaxi will start and how Robotaxi will spread. So I'm sitting here in Bangkok, Thailand, and I wrote Grab. Grab is the equivalent of Uber in Thailand. I think Grab actually bought Uber's operations. Uber was losing money here. I'm pretty sure Grab is losing money here. Yeah, all these new models will do 48 volt. All these new models will probably do steer by wire. All these new models will probably use the zero silicon carbide motors and the low rare earth I think it was low rare earth and zero silicon carbide. I think a whole bunch of things like that. And yeah, it could be full size van on Cybertruck castings, but I think the Cybertruck line is fully utilized, so I don't think there's room on that line for a van. Um, so uh, Robotaxi, how Robotaxi starts and how Robotaxi spreads. Hey, Chris. Here's how Robotaxi probably starts. You have existing Robotaxi trials for Waymo and Cruise in like San Francisco, California, in Chandler, Arizona. I think they're now doing Waymo in Los Angeles. There's places where there are existing Robotaxi networks operating. So Tesla simply goes to the first, one or two places that have Robotaxi. Probably pick one first, probably San Francisco, because Tesla has massive AI and autopilot operations in Palo Alto, which is just south of San Francisco, and start early Robotaxi testing in San Francisco. Dial that in, get the business process down, easy to get people in. A lot of people in San Francisco area have Tesla apps. Pretty easy to get people to adopt in San Francisco. Get it dialed in, get it working, and demonstrate safety. And get your operations model down. How are you operating this network? How are you getting this thing going? Because it's going to be an ongoing learning process. How do we operate the Robotaxi network most effectively? Where do we deploy charging? How do we, decide which vehicle charges when? A whole bunch of things like that. So San Francisco first, and you probably expand it to Los Angeles and to Phoenix or wherever there's existing Robotaxi trials, and you generate enough data that you're now able to go to regulators in other places and say, look, we've demonstrated it works. And you might do it in China too, because China has Robotaxi networks operating. So at some point, you've accumulated enough miles of pure Robotaxi use that you can say, look, we've got our data from FSD, in cars unsupervised, because by that point, you'll have FSD unsupervised. We've got, billion miles or whatever, billions of miles of FSD unsupervised. We've got millions or tens of millions of miles or hundreds of millions of miles in our Robotaxi network trials. We're ready to go. And Florida will say yes, basically instantly. I'm not even sure if you need to ask, but Florida will allow it instantly. Texas will allow it instantly. Nevada will allow it instantly. Probably roughly half of the US population, if not more. Because California, Texas, and Florida are the three largest states, and they're going to adopt quickly. So you're probably talking half the US population is going to have access to Robotaxi fairly early. China, once China says yes, you have access to the second largest market in the world, or arguably the largest market in the world. So this is when you get into what I think is really interesting is, what's the best way for Tesla to deploy the Robotaxis that they build? Like, I think, once you have the network operating, you can let other people put their vehicles in the Robotaxi network. But here's the challenge. In the United States, roughly the cost of a human-driven Uber ride is around $3 a mile. Might be $2.50 on a good day, it might be $2 a mile, but a good ballpark average for an Uber ride is $3 a mile. Here in Thailand, you're probably talking about 60 cents a mile for a Grab ride. Okay, so if Tesla deploys a Robotaxi in America, it generates, let's say you undercut pricing, right? So you go to $2.50 a mile. Or $2. Let's say they go to $2 a mile. So you're making $2 a mile in America running your Robotaxi in terms of revenue. In Thailand, you're only getting 50 cents a mile. So it doesn't make sense to take that capital asset, that vehicle, and deploy it in Thailand until you've saturated the US market enough to drive the price of a Robotaxi ride down low enough that it's starting to approach 50 cents a mile in the US. Now it makes sense to deploy. And I think it's basically you have high-cost countries and you have low-cost countries. You have high-cost countries and you have low-cost countries. So in countries where ride prices are high, you're going to want to deploy and you're going to want to grow. In countries, and there's going to be middle countries, of course, as well. I'm sure there's a spectrum I haven't mapped out, which countries have the highest ride prices, which countries have the lowest ride prices. I'm sure the US is in the high range. US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Western Europe are probably in the high range. Japan is probably in the middle. China is probably in the middle. Now, China, you're building the cars in China, and it's a really, really big market. So even if you're not making as much money doing Robotaxis in China as you're making in the US, you're probably going to do it in China. And also, China's a good proving ground. So, China would be a no-brainer at first, but the problem is that the ride prices in China are probably half the ride prices. Thank you, TB. The ride prices in China are probably half that the ride price what the ride prices are in um sorry, half what the ride prices are in half what the ride prices are in the United States. I don't know what ride prices are, and maybe Beijing and Shanghai are higher, but I would say on average ride prices in China are going to be lower. So if you are investing capital and you're building out your robotaxi network, you want to primarily spread your robotaxis in places where ride prices are high. And this is a thing that when I talk about how robotaxis going to have 10 million robotaxis making $1 a mile, and that works out to $500 billion a year in gross profit. When you expand to 100 million robotaxis, you're probably only making $20,000 in gross profit a vehicle, so it's only $2 trillion, right? Because um, as you grow the supply of robotaxis, the price of rides falls, and you want the price of rides to fall because you want to expand. Because what's the mission? The mission is to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. So, if you start at, let's say, $2 a mile, market's not that big, and you have to be careful. By the way, you can't price your rides too low because then there'll be too much demand and people will be waiting for a ride. So you have to balance your ride price with waits. If people are waiting 30 minutes for a ride, they're not going to take the ride. They're going to be dissatisfied with the network. So you have to price it high enough that the demand is not so high that you're able to satisfy all that demand in a reasonable time. So yeah, rich countries will subsidize the global rollout. And then as you expand in the United States and you go to, let's say, 10 million robotaxis, maybe you brought the price down to $1.50 a mile or $1 a mile. And keep in mind, each robotaxi is displacing 5 internal combustion engine vehicles. So you're accelerating the transition to sustainable energy. I've talked before about this. Tesla's probably going to stop selling you a car because a vehicle, they'll sell them to fleets that are going to operate them full time as robotaxis. But selling a regular person a car so it can sit in the garage 22 hours a day or sit, park 22 hours a day is not accelerating the transition to sustainable energy anywhere near as much as running a robotaxi 12, 20 hours a day. Probably, I'm guessing 16, 18 hours a day is the rough maximum what you're going to get out of a robotaxi. And I think Elon talks about 10 hours a day. He says 5 times as much usage, which would be 10 hours a day. So ideally, you'd want to spread it everywhere, but it's not going to make CapEx sense to deploy robotaxis in, say, Thailand or Malaysia or the Philippines, where you're going to get 50 cents a mile in revenue versus a place where you're going to get $2 a mile in revenue. And you take that revenue and you're going to make massive profits on the $2 a mile, the $1.50 a mile, even the $1 a mile. You're making massive profits. And you take that capital and you build more factories and you're able to churn out more cars. And you invest in more H100s or Dojo or whatever you're doing to grow your AI processing to improve everything you're doing. It gets better and better and better. And at some point you say, okay, we can see the trend, but I want to be clear. The falling of the price as you get lower, the demand grows a lot because when you hit, I'm going to say somewhere around $1.50 a mile. The average American spends about, I've heard 70 cents a mile, I've heard 88 cents a mile, I've heard 60 cents a mile, but let's call it 70 cents a mile. The average American spends 70 cents a mile on their car, right? There's a subset of Americans who pay more, right? There's people who don't drive as many miles, but their car is amortizing. There's people who have bad credit, people who have bad driving histories. You have bad driving history and bad credit, or both, your insurance rates are much higher. Your financing cost for the vehicle is much higher. So there's people, just a really simple example. I had a client years ago. I went out and got a Honda Accord. My payment was, I think, $249 a month. She was a working class, I think she was an EMT or something like that, ambulance attendant or whatever. I don't think she was a paramedic, but relatively low income and bad credit. I don't think she had a bad driving record, but she was paying $500 a month I was paying $250 a month for a brand new Honda Accord. She was paying $500 a month for a crappy Isuzu. Right? Her cost and we both drove a lot of miles. I drove a lot of miles for work. She drove a lot of miles for her work, right? But her cost per mile was double mine, even though she was driving a cheaper car, a cheaper, shittier car, right? So there's a subset of the population that have 1 or 2 DUIs on their record. One of my friends got a DUI. I got it reduced to what's called the DWAI in New York, but his insurance rates quadrupled for 4 years. Quadrupled. Okay, so you have these factors. So there's people, if the average person is paying 70 cents a mile, maybe 10% are paying $1.50 a mile. So as you bring the ride price down to $1.50 a mile, you start picking off that 10%. And that's a much larger share of the market than people who just want to go for a ride. We're just calling for an Uber, just taking a taxi or just taking a rental car. You're going to peel off rental car traffic. I think Uber and Lyft are already cutting into rental cars, but you basically eliminate rental cars. So that's another increase in your market. And then you start picking off people who own cars, and the lower you drive the price, the larger and larger share of people who own cars decide, I don't want to own a car anymore. And there's rich people who say, screw it, I want to own a car. I don't care how much it costs me. Okay, but probably 90% of the population is like, hey, you're going to save me $3,000 a year. I'll take it. Right? So, oh, dear Lord. So, Mitchell, I'm going to ignore your comment. Thou shalt not bring up Tesla economist in the chat. So the market expands in the U.S. much faster the lower you bring the price point. It's like an exponential in how big. And at past 70 cents a mile, the growth of the market starts dropping. But as you bring the price down, you not only expand the market in the U.S., but you start saying, okay, now it's a viable ride price in other countries. Now it's viable in Japan. Now it's more viable in China. Now it's more viable in Latin America. There are countries that where Southeast Asia might be cheap and India might be even cheaper. And this is why, by the way, I don't think Tesla vehicles in India make any sense for 10 years because the India market is just too small. There's not enough money there. The cost of a taxi ride in India is so cheap, it's ridiculous. I just took a ride I was in Phnom Penh. I paid like less than $2 for a Grab ride from the mall back to my hotel. It wasn't a long ride, but I think it was $1.50 or $1.75 for a Grab ride. Like, can you imagine getting an Uber and paying less than $5 just even for a short ride? Has anybody ever paid less than $5 for a short ride on an Uber? I don't know if I've ever paid less than $10 for a ride on an Uber. So when I talk about 100 million robotaxis, it's hard. I'll always people saying, well, how are you going to do 100 million robotaxis in the United States? Well, you're not. You're going to do 100 million robotaxis in the United States, Canada, China, Western Europe, Japan, South Korea. There's markets where all of a sudden, so as you add in markets, the exponential of the growth of demand just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So, 10 million robotaxis in the United States is equivalent to 50 million vehicles. You're not even picking off, close to half of vehicle owners at that point, right? Because there's 200 million vehicles in the United States. So, when you add in, and you add in Canada and you add in Western Europe, like the path to, I just wanted to get to this point that it's going to take several years, and I think Tesla's going to really ramp up manufacturing. So by 2030, I think the goal, if we can get robotaxis operating by say 2026 in a meaningful way, maybe there's a trial by the end of maybe there's trials by the end of this year. More likely by 2025, we start seeing robotaxi trials. Certainly by 2026, we see robotaxi trials. By 2030, we've got demonstrated robotaxi, and now Tesla's taken all this revenue that's coming off of what the limited any amount of robotaxi is going to start generating massive amounts of cash. And you invest that cash in building cybercab factories, and cybercab factories are going to be easy to build, easy to deploy, easy to ramp fast, and that's how you see maybe it's 2031 or 2032, but you start seeing Tesla making 20 million vehicles a year. The gerbil said that robotaxi isn't going to be as profitable as we think. Yeah, so trust the gerbil. So for people who aren't familiar, Lost Gerbil is my nickname for Ross Gerber, the head of Gerber Kawasaki, a prominent account on X and a frequent talking head on CNBS and other finance media broadcasts, who has demonstrated he completely does not understand Tesla. So he just posted, I didn't screenshot it, but he posted that that robotaxi won't be that profitable because Waymo's out there and there's all these others that are going to be delivering rides. It's like, this is one of the critical detail that many people don't understand is, yes, Waymo is offering robotaxi rides and they're pretty good. There's just a video yesterday of a Waymo robotaxi going the wrong way. So the problem with Waymo and Cruise and most other robotaxi trials is their vehicles cost a lot. And their vehicles don't last as long. So if you have a $150,000 vehicle and you drive it for 150,000 miles, it's $1 a mile just on the cost of the vehicle, assuming you're not even paying interest. right? Just amortizing the vehicle over your 150,000 miles at $150,000 is $1 a mile. And all right, you cut the cost down to $75,000, it's still 50 cents a mile, right? And then they're not energy efficient because they haven't thought through energy efficiency. And like Waymo is running hybrids that are probably getting 40, you can claim they're making 50 miles a gallon, but they're probably getting 40 miles a gallon. And 40 miles a gallon, $4 a gallon, there's 10 cents a mile there. You got your tires, you add it all up, you got insurance, operations, whatever, they end up costing, more than $2 a mile. I think Waymo is in the ballpark of $3 a mile, even without paying a driver. So the difference is with Tesla, they're really focusing on hammering out efficiencies. So Cybercab is probably going to cost Tesla less than $20,000 to manufacture, and it's hyper efficient. It's going to be hyper efficient. So I think I read that the Jaguar I-Pace that Waymo was using was doing less than 3 miles a kilowatt hour. I think it was 2 to 3 miles a kilowatt hour. Where Cybertruck is not very efficient in miles per kilowatt hour. Right? Cybertruck might be down around 2 or 2.5 miles a kilowatt hour. But the Model 3, it's like 4.6 miles a kilowatt hour. And my prediction is that the Cybercab will be approaching 6 miles a kilowatt hour. So that means your energy cost per mile is down to around 2 cents, 2.5 cents a mile. So Tesla's huge advantage in a world of ubiquitous robotaxis is, well, our robotaxis only cost 10 cents a mile, total cost all in. Because you take the $20,000 that it cost you to build it, you amortize it over 1,000,000 miles because you make them better and you make them last longer. And now your amortization is only 2 cents a mile instead of $1 a mile. It's just a massive, massive game changer. No $5 Uber rides in Tokyo, even with good exchange rates. So Uber is more expensive in Japan because you're just basically paying extra. You're getting the same thing you would get by getting a taxi and paying extra. Don't take Uber in Japan. Unless you don't have another way of getting a taxi, don't use Uber in Japan. I did use Uber in Japan because I did eventually get a better way of getting rides. And Uber is not ubiquitous in Japan. I think it's primarily Tokyo. But yeah, will Cybertruck be Robotaxi unveil? I don't understand your question, Mark. Lost Gerbil is actually a rat. DeWiz says people really do not understand how FSD mimics the human brain. I'm going to go with this question. I'm going to go with this comment, DeWiz. I like this comment. I really started thinking about how much does computer technology relate to how our brains operate. Like when you're dreaming at night, is your brain defragmenting the hard drive? Is there a part of your brain that trains and that part of your brain is inference? If you're like, I was walking down the street the other day and I fell. I hit, like, I was looking for where I was going to cross the street. Bangkok sidewalks are notoriously bad. And I didn't see the dip in the sidewalk. And I felt my ankle start to turn. And then I just reacted. All muscle memory. And I felt fantastic. I did like the perfect fall. I don't remember it at all, but I must have done the perfect fall because my forearms were a little sore, like just briefly. I felt like a sting in my forearms. And I avoided significant damage to my ankle. I took it easy on my ankle for a few days just to be sure, but it didn't swell. I've turned my ankle so many times in life. And I didn't hit my head, whatever, and I after I hit my forearms, I rolled. That's all muscle memory. And a lot of the things that we do in life are reacting to the photons that come in our eyes and our other sensors, and we react quickly without thinking. And so that's the inference. That's what the car is doing mostly, is sort of reacting to what photons are coming in without doing deep thought. There's some planning involved and whatever, but it's basically reacting to what it sees. The training compute in Palo Alto and wherever else they're rolling out, Dojo and other training compute centers, trains that inference. Basically, it's the equivalent of it's controlling your muscle memory. So do our brains at night when we're sleeping go through all the data from the day and decide how to retrain our inference and retrain our muscle memory? I think that's an interesting question. So yeah, I think that's a big deal. I wanted IRRI. I don't know how to pronounce that. Erie brings up cordless charging is on the way. So I'm going to go back to charging for a second. One of the other things about supercharging is it involves significant moving parts. You have this large cable, you have this large plug that you plug in. We know that Cybertruck has a port for future wireless charging. So they wouldn't have put that in Cybertruck unless they're serious about wireless charging. So wireless charging is coming. Now, if you think about a robotaxi world, I don't think it's a big deal to have a guy getting 20 bucks an hour plugging in robotaxis and unplugging them, or having an Optimus at the supercharger station plugging and unplugging robotaxis. But it's probably more efficient in a few ways to have wireless charging. The charging itself is probably less efficient with wireless than it is with the plugs, with the cables and the plugs, but it's like 94% efficient, and they're probably going to get it a little more efficient. And last I saw, the wireless charging wasn't able to do like 100, they capped at like 36 kilowatts, but I'm betting the Tesla engineers can amp that up to 150 or 250 kilowatts. And the Cybercab won't need more than 150 kilowatts because it's going to have a 50, I think 53 kilowatt hour pack is what we were hinted at. So, um, but the point is that maybe Tesla is thinking ahead to a pivot where we're really going to be focusing on wireless charging rather than cable, rather than the current format of supercharging. And then you wouldn't want to deploy V4 superchargers. You'd really want to have wireless chargers. And think about the maintenance cost. Although you have slightly less efficiency in the energy cost, you probably have a lot more efficiency on the maintenance cost. And it may be less capital cost. It may cost less to build an inductive charger when you build them at scale than it costs to build a V4 supercharger. So there's a lot of potential here. Erie. IRRI. Okay. Should a Tesla bot be a supercharger, full service attendant, clean windows, plug? I do think there's a question of when the Robotaxi comes into the charging location, it makes sense that somebody checks to clean it. If that person also has to plug in and unplug, that takes time away from cleaning the vehicle and inspecting the vehicle. Did your girlfriend dump you after you embarrassed her by falling off the curb? No, she actually checked to make sure I was okay. She was concerned about me. She's very sweet. She's upstairs right now. I'm at a 2-floor condo. She's upstairs working. The amount of people I see voting no on the compensation package on Reddit is alarming. Yeah, but that's, random people with, either 0 shares or 1 or 2 shares. It's suicide to. Let's talk about the vote for a second. There's a shareholder vote right now. I think we adequately covered the Robotaxi question. If people have questions about the Robotaxi idea, about how Robotaxis are spread, please let me know in the chat. But there's a shareholder vote going right now. I voted on 3 of my 4 accounts that have shares in Tesla. At the time I voted, I wasn't able to vote on the 4th account, which is the largest account. I have to go back and check. But I'm voting yes on, I'm voting the board's recommendations. I'm voting in particular yes on Elon's compensation package. And I made a video before. I think it is basically you're asking to cut your shares. You're asking to drop your share price by 80%. If the package gets voted down, here's the nightmare scenario, and I did a short video about this, but here's the nightmare scenario. The nightmare scenario is the package gets voted down, and Elon says, okay, the shareholders have spoken. I'm taking this as a vote of no confidence in me as CEO of Tesla, and I'm leaving the company. And I'm going to go focus on Neuralink, SpaceX, XAI, X. I got enough to do with my time, and Tesla's taken a lot of my time, and it's apparent that the shareholders don't think that my time added value or added significant value, and they didn't honor the agreement that we had from 2018. So I'm going to move on. Is she willingly upstairs? Yes, she's willing. There's a room upstairs in this condo. Thanks to a friend of mine who's letting us stay here while we're dealing with the confusion over the condo I was supposed to be in and the condo we're going to move into hopefully soon. It's a 2-floor condo, and that one has the doors closed. It has its own air conditioning. It's amazing. So I've done live streams from up there, so as I don't bother her. So, mouse with microphone. What? So, if Elon leaves, my prediction is that 90% of the AI team, if not 100%, leaves within a month or 2. Because there's lots of opportunities to do amazing work in AI. And the reason that these AI engineers are at Tesla is because Elon's there. And they have a leader that they trust who wants to innovate, wants to do great things. You get rid of Elon, who's next? How quickly are you going to get a new CEO? Is that next CEO going to be a visionary? Is that next CEO going to be committed to the vision of robotaxis? If Gary Black and if Barry Glack and Lost Gerbil and Tesla QCat and others had their way, the next CEO would be like, we got to make more cars. We got to come up with new models. We got to, they would be playing the manufacturer cars game. And if Tesla is just a car maker, then maybe you get to 4 million cars a year, maybe 5, and you make 20% margins if you're lucky. Probably these guys spend all their money on Super Bowl advertising, and you drive the margins down to 10%, and you become maybe a $100 billion company. Well, right now we're a $500-600 billion company. Do you want your shares to go from roughly $200 a share to roughly $40 a share? That's what you're voting for. My opinion, okay, is if you vote against Elon's package, you are saying, I don't want $200 a share. I don't want $1,000 a share. I want $40 a share. Because if you have some fantasy that somehow replacing Elon makes the stock go up and makes the company perform better, like none of the AI. Listen, I'm not talking about manufacturing engineering. I'm not talking about battery engineering. I think you lose some engineers in any category, but Tesla's doing some really cool stuff. And maybe there's no better place to do manufacturing engineering than Tesla right now. But if you're doing AI engineering, there's so many great places you can go and do work, and they're getting poached, and Tesla is fighting to keep them. And they're, Elon's like making them offers to go to XAI because they want to do something interesting. So lots of interesting work to do in AI. And if you lose the guy who's super committed to AI, who just said we're going to invest $10 billion in AI hardware this year, right? If you lose that guy, who's coming in? I'm an AI engineer. Somebody's offering me $1 million a year to go do something really cool. And I'm not going to stay here for a company that's actually been paying me a little bit less on the prospect that my shares are. Now I'm looking like, fuck, I see the AI team's leaving. What's the future of this? I was betting on the future of this company being Robotaxi. The Robotaxi future might be shot. Let me go over here to OpenAI or Meta or Anthropic, whatever. These companies are paying a ton of money. Don't play with Elon's package. So Simonis Pura says, I'd like you to explain about the compensation Elon the staff is suggesting to vote for, the board is suggesting to vote for. What is this and what consequence it will have if the shareholders will vote no? I think I just covered that. It's the package that we agreed to in 2018 that I voted for in 2018, and 73% of independent shareholders voted for it in 2018, and a Delaware judge struck it down, and the vote is to reinstate the compensation package that was voted for in 2018. If it's voted down, to me, it's a vote of no confidence in Elon, and I think there's a high risk that Elon leaves the company. The AI engineers leave, not necessarily with him. The AI engineers, some might go with him to XAI or somewhere else, but a lot of engineers just leave the company, and Tesla becomes a shell of its former self. And you probably lose manufacturing engineers, you probably lose some other engineers, but I think it's the AI team where you lose the most. And the future of Tesla becomes an ordinary car maker. Maybe they're doing energy supply too, but will they outcompete CATL and BYD are doing, the equivalent of Megapack now. Is the future Tesla team going to be as competitive against CATL and BYD in that market if Elon leaves? Are they going to have the vision about how to be CapEx efficient? Are they going to manage the company efficiently? Is there going to be somebody who's going to be able to use the big hammer that Andre Karpathy said, and just say, hey, we got to make some big changes here? You're going to end up with a CEO who doesn't have the ability to make the big changes. And you take Tesla from a 500 million, right now we have a $500-600 billion company that we think is going to grow to a $1 trillion, $2 trillion, $10 trillion company. You take Elon away, you take the AI engineering team away, you're looking at a $100 billion company. So thank you, Don Browning. Ty Kara, I am in Thailand. I would say Thailand is my base of operations for my digital nomad life, but I am a resident of Delray Beach, Florida. Is this going to have a temporary stock price? I think if the vote goes no, I think the stock falls 50% the next day. I think if Elon leaves, I think the stock falls another 50% the next day. And when the AI engineering team leaves, then the stock might be struggling to hold a $100 billion market cap. If I incorporated in Thailand, I don't even know what it means to incorporate in Thailand. I have a retirement visa. I have a 90-day visa in Thailand, and it will soon be extended to be a 1 year on top of the 90 days. And then every year I'll re-up the visa as long as I'm hanging around. But still a Florida legal resident, still own cars in Florida, still vote in Florida, still have a place in Florida, etc. Permanent address, whatever. Still pay car insurance in Florida on the Model 3. If prototypes are easy and factories are hard, I vote for Elon's mom. She makes only the best. Yeah. Thank you, Sefo. Is it Sifo? Sifo Shabalala? Thank you for being a member and thank you for your comment. So I mean, that's the big deal. This is what I think is really important is if you like, I see this future of robotaxis spreading throughout the world. I see robotaxis cleaning the air. You know, you're getting internal combustion engine vehicles off the road. So why would stockholders vote no instead of yes? Didn't understand that part. People are voting no because of Elon man bad syndrome. There's a spread. I have this joke that I mostly talk about on X, but I'll talk about it here. I believe there's a new condition that we're still working on understanding called smarter than Elon diseases. Okay, STEDs. We have STDs, which are sexually transmitted diseases, and we have smarter than Elon diseases, which are STEDs, STDs, STEDs. And there's a number of variants of smarter than Elon diseases. One of them is just, Elon doesn't know what he's doing. I know better, blah, 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 blah. There's a specific component of segment of smarter than Elon diseases that actually has a formal name. It's Elon man bad syndrome. Similar to Orange Man Bad syndrome, but it's Elon Man Bad syndrome. Orange Man Bad is the Donald Trump. People hate Donald Trump. I am not a Donald Trump fan, just to be clear, but I do find it funny that I think Bill Maher called him Orange Hitler. So there is a sense that anything Donald Trump must be wrong because he's Orange Man Bad. And anything Elon does is wrong because he must be Elon Man Bad. So, Steve says $56 billion is a lot of money. What BlackRock and Vanguard think about it? So when the options package was awarded, when the contract was decided back in 2018, the value was about $2.3 billion. So people are tossing around $55 billion like that's the real value. And the value at the time the package was agreed was $2.3 billion. So the idea that in 2018, the board snuck in $56 billion for Elon past every shareholders, and the shareholders didn't really understand the package. No, there was an outside consultant who came in and evaluated it and said it was worth $2.3 billion. It looks like it's worth a lot now because Elon delivered on his end of the bargain, right? And the consequence if you vote yes is that there's some dilution, but it's not immediate. He gets options that he can't exercise and sell for, I think, 5 years. Elon derangement syndrome. Yeah, that's good. Will Vanguard vote in favor of this comp package? What we think we know is that the investor relations team met with at least the 10 largest shareholders of Tesla, leaving out Elon and Kimball, and probably they didn't have to meet with Larry Ellison, right? And they asked them their opinions. Larry Ellison, I think, is the third largest shareholder. They asked them their opinions. And I believe that included institutional shareholders. I think there were 4 large funds that said, we want you to reinstate the package. They knew what they voted for in 2018. They didn't need a judge to save them from their own decision making. They understood. They knew who the directors were. And so if the vote is yes, then we're fine. Do I think it will pass? I think it will probably pass. I think it's probably like an 80 to 90% pass. I think that Tesla wouldn't have put this for a vote if they didn't think it was going to pass. I think they did their homework and they talked to institutional investors and they made sure. There is an organization called Institutional Shareholder Services that recommends how funds should vote. Elon jokingly refers to it as ISIS. It is driven by diversity, equity, and inclusion, and there's a sort of Marxist philosophy that seems to have snuck into this organization. And some funds might vote no if ISIS votes no, recommends voting no. And then you have retail shareholders. I think the vast majority of retail shareholders are going to vote yes. Large shareholders like Jason DeBolt are going to vote or already have voted yes. I'm sure Bruce Burnworth is voting yes. Bradford Ferguson is voting yes. Larry Goldberg is voting yes. I'm sure Dave Lee is voting yes. There's a lot of large retail shareholders that I know, and there's a lot of large retail shareholders that I sort of know. Then there's a lot of small whiners with 9 shares or 14 shares, or like I have more shares than Ross Gerber's fund. I have more shares than Barry Glack's fund. My impression of India from my brief stay there in the Indian. So that's the story there. So I do think we'll be fine, but there's some risk. There is some risk. VB says your impression of India from your brief stay there in Indian auto market. So India is not for me. I like going for long walks, and India is not a walking friendly country. I stayed in Goa, the state of Goa, which is probably, I don't think there's any one place that's a good, sign of what India's like. But my Indian friends told me Goa was the best place to be, and I went to Goa and I didn't particularly like it. People are great. Food is fantastic. Cost of living is super low. Um, but I like to go for long walks, and I was terrified walking on the roads. Um, and I like, um, I was terrified being in a car. The roads are just terrifying, and that's a problem. So then, the Indian auto market, the problem is that the volume of cars that cost more than $20,000 in the Indian auto market is really small, and the volume of people who are willing to pay 50 cents a mile for a ride is vanishingly small, because you can get rides in India for probably, you can hire somebody to drive you around for a day for like 10, $20. I mean, it's like it's absurd how cheap life is in India. So I think that it's going to take a, India's economy needs to grow, and Tesla needs to build out the Robotaxi network and spread it to the point where, and continue innovating on vehicles, and maybe in the future there'll be a $10,000 or $15,000 Tesla. I don't know if Barry Glack has said how he'll vote. He'll probably say he's going to vote yes, and he might vote no. Any chance a Texas judge vetoes it? So I believe that this vote will actually be decided, if there's a lawsuit brought over this vote, it will be in Delaware, not in Texas. One of the votes is whether to move to Texas. So I believe Delaware will still have jurisdiction over this vote. In fact, I think that Tesla should have done one thing to move to Texas, and then done the new package after. But I think there's a timing issue if they just couldn't do it that way. Tom Zhu reassigned to China as SVP. What does that mean in your opinion? I'm not aware of that. I think that, position titles don't matter as much in Tesla, and Tom Zhu will go where he's needed when he's needed. Could you talk about your cost per mile for Robotaxi estimate in depth? Great question, Thomas Stanley. I love this question. Okay. $20,000 for the vehicle, million-mile life. That's 2 cents a mile. Amortize the 20. I'm leaving out interest rates. Tesla self-financing, so the interest cost is really. If you set an 8% interest rate, it would be higher, but ballpark 2 cents a mile. The vehicle drives for 10 years, 100,000 miles a year. You amortize the $20,000 over a million miles, you get 2 cents a mile. This is not per ride mile, per paid mile. This is per total miles. Okay. Then you have electricity. So the Model 3 gets about 4.6 miles a kilowatt hour. The Model S gets about 4 miles a kilowatt hour. I think Model Y gets more than 4 miles a kilowatt hour. I expect the Cybercab to be more energy efficient than the Model 3. Okay, so I think my gut is they're aiming to get to 6 miles a kilowatt hour. They might not quite get there. If they can get to 6 miles a kilowatt hour, and the average electricity price is 15 cents a kilowatt hour, that's 2.5 cents a mile. So you got 2 cents a mile for the amortizing the vehicle, and 2.5 cents a mile for the energy cost. Now, when you dive into these numbers, the cost of tires can add up really fast on a per mile basis. If you have $400 set of tires that last 20,000 miles, right? Well, there's 2 cents a mile, right? But if you have $200 set of tires that lasts 100,000 miles, well, now you're 0.2 of a cent a mile. You've got maintenance costs. People focus on insurance costs. I think Tesla's going to self-insure, and the rate of accidents is going to be really small, and you're going to have cameras that are going to capture when somebody else causes the accident. That's going to defeat, the liability claims, the bogus. There's lawyers and there's networks of criminals who will stage accidents and set up accidents and then claim all these injuries, and that's going to be a problem. But having 8 cameras on the record everything is going to be a lot more reliable in demonstrating what actually happened in an accident. So I think you'll radically reduce the number of claims. So insurance will be less of a cost. And you've got windshield wipers. You don't have oil changes. You don't have mufflers. You don't have spark plugs. There's a lot less maintenance on an EV. And they're going to make this vehicle as efficient as possible. So I think that's how you get down to close to 10 cents a mile, and maybe even less than 10 cents a mile. ISIS opposed the original comp package in the past 73%. So ISIS is not that effective. ISIS, Institutional Share Services. Delaware sucks, yes. Yeah, please check out elonbits.com for the merch. What's Outside the Simulation, I think t-shirt is still on there. Tesla's the next Tesla is probably the most popular t-shirt. I probably should pump out more t-shirts. I think my personal favorite is I cheat on my diet, but I don't cheat on my women. Oh, I should mention really quickly, I posted, if you go to my community page on YouTube, my girlfriend and I are planning a new channel where it's called Bikini Nomad. And I want to reassure everyone, I will not be wearing any bikinis in the videos. There will be brief bikini moments in some of the videos. But the idea is, what's nomad life like? A Western man's perspective and an Asian woman's perspective. An educated, intelligent, computer science trained woman who also looks good in a bikini. And will mostly not be in a bikini, but will be briefly in a bikini, probably some of the shots, some of the clips. But talking about, here's what nomad life is like. Here's what these beaches are like in this location. Here's a good place to have a cup of coffee while you're working with your laptop and they got good Wi-Fi and you got a great view, right? Here's a good place to stay if you're a digital nomad. And we are I expect us to be partial nomads. We're not full-on nomads. A full-on nomad doesn't have a base of operations. I really have two bases of operation. I have a permanent address in Florida, and I'm going to have a 1-year lease on a condo here in Bangkok. But we expect to travel probably twice a month. 3-day weekend here. 4 or 5 days over there. A lot of this depends on what happens with our lives otherwise. But I'm expecting to live a life like that for at least a couple of years, and we'll be making probably 2 or 3 videos a month. This is a fantasy right now, but anyway, if you go on YouTube and you search for Bikini Nomad, the channel will be the first hit. There'll be lots of fun videos to watch that are related to that topic. But this will not be a bikini heavy video channel. It'll be a nomad heavy channel with some hints of bikinis. No banana hammocks, please. So please subscribe to Bikini Nomad on YouTube. And I think the first video will probably is probably a month away, but we'll see. Maybe we get it done quicker. Why do I think it's taking so long for Tesla insurance in Florida? I don't know the answer. I'm very frustrated with it. I am paying a lot more for car insurance because Tesla insurance is not available in Florida. It's probably costing me a lot of money. What's the visa situation in Thailand? Jimmy Masters, great question. That's probably going to be a topic for the Bikini Nomad channel, but there's a channel called Nomad Capitalist. There's a couple other channels that talk about visas. Thailand is a great place to come if you want to be a nomad. Japan is actually a pretty good place for nomads. Japan, first of all, it varies what country you're from. For American citizens, you can go to Japan for 90 days at a shot. And you can do a total of 180 days a year. And you could do 30 days 6 times. You could do 90 days twice, 90 days, and then 30, 30, 30. But you have to break it up. You can't just go 90 days, leave the country. I don't think you can come back the next day. I don't know exactly how Japan enforces that. Thailand, I think you can get a 60-day tourist visa if you apply ahead. If you arrive without a visa, you get a 30-day. That's again for Americans. You get a 30-day visa on arrival. A lot of countries have something called visa on arrival. And then before your 30 days is up, you go to a place here in Bangkok called IT Loxi, and you extend for another 30 days. So you can do 60 days in Thailand pretty easily. It costs you $6. $60? I forget. I think it's $60 to extend another 30 days. 50 or $60, 1900 baht, I think, to extend for another 30 days. And then there are people who come for 30 days, extend another 30 days, leave the country for a week, come back. I've done this twice. Left the country for 3 days here, left the country for a week there, came back and restarted the process. Thank you, Jimmy Masters. There's a clothing line called Nomad Swimwear for plus size ladies. That's not the intent. And my girlfriend is definitely not plus size. I weigh almost twice as much as she does, and she's not short. I think Cybercab will pilot first in San Francisco. I think that's the natural place. The Bay Area will be the first place we'll see Cybercab running Robotaxi. So there's a lot of visa opportunities. Thailand has something called Thai Elite Visa. You pay $25,000, you get a 5-year visa. You pay $50,000, you get a 10-year visa. I don't remember the exact numbers, by the way, but it's around $25,000 for the 5-year, and I don't know how much extra it is for the 10-year and 15-year. A lot of countries have some sort of elite visa like that. I'm working on a retirement visa. I'm 50 years old. When you're 50 years old or older, you can get a retirement visa. Have to put $20,000 in a Thai bank account, get health insurance, and jump through one or two other hoops. Credit cards are not widely accepted in Thailand. They're somewhat accepted in Thailand depending on where you go. If you're in foreigner dense areas, they're accepted mostly, but not always. I was just in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and in order to get start the retirement visa process in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, dollars. They want cash dollars, and they take credit cards almost everywhere. Where I was in a very limited area. But everywhere I went, pretty much took credit cards, and everywhere I went pretty much took US dollars. They prefer US dollars to their own currency. That's not true in Thailand. That's not true in Malaysia. That's not true in Vietnam. Um, yes, I understand, Jim. That anything you name your channel, when people search for it, something else is going to come up. But I expect that we will be the #1 result for Bikini Nomad, and I don't think people are going to be searching for Bikini Nomad that much. It's not the search term. It's the I think we're creating a brand. And my long-term hope is that we travel, and then at some point, some resort says, "Hey, we saw your channel. We'd like to invite you to come stay at our resort and make a video about nomad life in Bali." Like, and then on the list, by the way, um, probably Boracay, Philippines, Davao, Philippines, Cebu, Philippines, Bali, Indonesia, probably a couple other places in Indonesia. Early on, we'll be doing a lot of Thai locations because we're in Thailand. Miyazaki, Japan. I'm not going to bother trademarking. I'm too lazy to do that. And honestly, like, there's no enforcement of intellectual property laws anyway. The cost of paying someone to enforce your intellectual property is more than the value you get by enforcing your intellectual property. If we all of a sudden had 1 million subs and we're making, $1 million a year, then it makes sense. But we're not McDonald's. Yeah, maybe we'll do T-shirts and stuff like that. I don't know. Maybe we'll have a bikini line. Who knows? But most likely it's not successful, right? Most likely we don't succeed. We make a few videos, we have some fun. After we make 10, 20 videos, we're like, oh, this isn't really worth the effort. And we stop, right? And we're not really traveling anymore because all of a sudden we got babies and we're traveling less. I think we actually would travel with babies, though. The Tesla Man T-shirt was taken down by the website, by the company that sells my T-shirts. And so the Tesla Man T-shirt is not available. I'm frustrated by that. I might bring it back at some point, find a way to bring it back. Will Tesla buyback shares or offer dividends once it has massive free cash flow? Great question, Mike K. Elon very clearly hinted that the plan to get him to 25% voting control of Tesla is for Tesla to do massive share buybacks. Who do you think could do Rob Maurer's job the best? I don't know if Rob Maurer's job needs to be done anymore. My guess would be Dylan Loomis. My best guess would be Dylan Loomis. I think that it makes more sense to get your information on X. Like, I should clear, I'm frustrated with YouTube. I just had a copyright notice from YouTube over a video I did a while ago where I had a clip of Peter Rawlinson talking, and I was told that was a copyright violation, and the copyright holder, Discovery Communications, which apparently owns Lucid Motors, the clip was from a Lucid Motors video, and YouTube upheld the copyright claim against me. Now, I don't lose any money, and that video doesn't get many views anymore. It's not really meaningful, but the fact that YouTube is run so poorly, and I complained about this on X, and I got a bullshit response from YouTube. This platform is hell. The X platform is growing. The X platform is great. I expect the X platform to get better. The X platform does not currently reward video creators well. So when I post a video here, I get more views, people watch longer, and I make more money. When I post videos on X, people watch like 3 seconds on average, 10 seconds maybe. Rocket and Tesla cars and bikinis. That's an interesting idea. Black market Tesla Man shirt. It's TSLA Man shirt, not Tesla Man shirt. Is there any stock price you would sell your stock? I don't think about it that way. That's the thing. I think I'll sell the stock when I think the stock is priced higher than it's worth. If it's, look, if it's close, right? If Tesla's stock price rises to what I think its real value is, and I don't think that there's that much upside anymore because the stock is fairly valued, then I'd probably sell some stock. I don't have a number. Have I looked up starting strength yet? I don't know what starting strength is. I am going to do strength training after we're done with this video. I had a nice high protein breakfast this morning of 3 eggs and 3 sausages, a little bit of onion and tomato. You can buy back all the shares, but you get my Tesla stock on it. Well, I don't think they're going to buy back all the shares, but they'll probably be buying back tens of billions, or hundreds of billions of dollars of stock. It is easy to get a visa. It is easy to get a tourist visa in Thailand if you're an American citizen and probably European citizen. And if you're willing to pay money, you can get an elite visa for $25,000. I think that's the rough number. 900,000 baht, maybe. You can work out what 900,000 baht is in Thai currency. I don't, and whatever your currency is. Look up Thai elite visa if you want to know the easy way to get a visa. If you're 50 years old, it's relatively easy to get a retirement visa. Elon is talking about bringing back Vine. I never understood why. I never really watched it, so I don't know what the big deal is with that. Mark Plot, Elon mentioned buybacks in the, I think it was in the investor call in the transcript. If you search the transcript of the Q1 call, Elon mentioned buybacks in order to restore his voting control of Tesla. And of course, there's other reasons to buy back the stock, right? Does anyone buy the Barry Glack overhang T-shirt? No, no. The only T-shirt that really sells in any significant volume is the Tesla's the next Tesla T-shirt. Nothing is selling right now. People aren't buying T-shirts. I haven't really, because the T-shirt sales fell off, because I've been busy with other things. I haven't really gotten motivated. I know I put up a T-shirt recently. I put up a new T-shirt recently. I don't even remember what it was. And then I think it disappeared. Like that's another thing. Like YouTube is a hassle. The site that does my T-shirts is a hassle. Retirement happy says getting to 1,000 shares. Well, I'll just talk really quickly about Nomad. One other Nomad thing. The cost of living as a nomad in Southeast Asia, and I'm including Japan, even though that's not Southeast Asia. The cost of living as a nomad in Japan, Thailand, Philippines, if I went to the Philippines, Malaysia, when I went to the Philippines, the cost of that life is less than my cost of living in Florida. Dramatically less. The cost of Airbnb is less than my rent, and I'm not paying to own a car, and the cost of riding in Grabs and riding on mass transit is much lower than the cost of owning a car. With the bots, Tesla will take years to slow down. Yeah, I mean, I think people have no idea how big Optimus is going to be. Okay, we're more than an hour in. I'm definitely out of material. I need to go hit the gym, do some workout. That's the do I see Teslas on the road? I'll ask this question. Do I see Teslas on the road in Thailand other than in Bangkok? Yes, yes, yes. I see a lot of Teslas. I was walking back from Prampong Station yesterday. I saw 3 Model Ys. I saw 2 BYDs. I see a lot of BYDs in Thailand. I see a fair number of Teslas. I was down in Songkhla, which is a 10-hour drive south. And there's no Tesla sales center south of Bangkok. There's only one Tesla sales center in Bangkok. Real sales center. There's a couple of little pop sort of like small showroom areas, but there's only one real Tesla service sales center. And I saw multiple Teslas in Songkhla. And that was like a month or 2 ago now. So it's growing fast. Tesla's doing really well in Thailand. I saw 1 Tesla in all of Phnom Penh. I did not see any BYDs or any other EVs in Phnom Penh. The only one I saw was 1 Tesla Model 3. Posted it on X. All right. So thanks everybody so much for watching. I'm going to go hit the gym. Please like, share, subscribe. Please check out elonbits.com for the merch. Please follow me on the X platform, WR4NYGov, and subscribe there if you want to support me. Support me on YouTube as a YouTube channel member. Support me on Patreon. Support me on The Daily Lie. Thanks so much for watching.